7:40, welcome back in. Homicides are down in the district, but things are moving in the opposite direction when it comes to domestic violence. That is on the rise, and advocates say more women are being seriously hurt and killed by intimate partners. This morning, we wanted to take a deeper look at this alarming trend and what can be done to better protect those in our community. Joining me this morning is Becky Lee, founder and executive director of Becky's Fund, a nonprofit organization working to end domestic violence. Good morning to you. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I know this is such an important conversation. Talk about some of the statistics, around domestic violence and who it impacts.
Sure. So, as you just mentioned, right now, we know that overall domestic violence affects everyone, right?
Yeah.
There's no discrimination against who is actually impacted, but our numbers show us that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men, and that's obviously what's reported, are impacted by domestic violence. And in particular right now, I think, because often we only react when we see something in the news, when a tragedy occurs.
Right.
But we see while crime is going down, even in DC, but also nationally, we see a surge in domestic violence. And realizing that the home is the most dangerous place for women, which is a really scary thing to think about. But then understanding that that's why we need more education about how to recognize domestic violence and also providing the resources available for survivors to leave.
And talk about that kind of contradicting narrative, because you've got, homicides going down, domestic violence is on the rise. What do you make of that, and what is the reason behind it?
Sure. There's I think a combination of factors. There's not one sort of solution for ending and preventing domestic violence. I think one of the pieces, obviously, understanding that domestic violence is so hidden, right? It often happens in the privacy of our homes. With crime, you see on the streets, you have, recognizing out in the open what's going on. But because of that sort of secrecy, as well as the isolation of abusers, it can be very hard to recognize and easy to miss. We also know that there are so many ways you can abuse, right? Domestic violence is defined as any act or behavior used to maintain power and control over another person. We see with the increase, obviously, of technology-assisted abuse, stalking, even access to guns, right? We know that when there is a gun in a domestic violence situation, that the risk of homicide goes up 500%. So showing that partner violence is literally the #1 cause of death for women today.
Yeah. And we have seen some incredibly disturbing cases of partner violence here in the district recently. Raven Edwards was shot and killed by her boyfriend earlier this year. Ex-boyfriend Melissa Wallace Pulliam just killed a couple of weeks ago by her ex-boyfriend. Talk about the escalation there. And we were just talking before in the break, and you said these women did everything right. Yeah. Talk about signs and what resources are available.
Sure. I think it's really easy when you're on the outside looking in. We ask questions like, why didn't you leave earlier? Or what didn't you do? But the question we should be asking is, what is enabling this person to continue abusing you? And what barriers were there for you to be able to not leave, right? Or what barriers were there in be able to access that safety? Leaving abuse is the most dangerous time for a survivor of domestic violence. They are at a 75% higher risk of being killed. So we know that separation time when they're actually physically leaving the abusive relationship is very dangerous. All those women that you were talking about, and very, statistically speaking, that's called murder-suicide, right? Where you see somebody fleeing abuse, and then the abuser saying, oh my gosh, like, this person has just left. I can't maintain my power and control. So they go looking for them, end up killing them, and then dying by suicide. But typically that's what we're seeing, is that this increase in this violence because of access.
Yeah.
Right.
And access, and I know we talk about resources too. Funding has a lot to do with that. There's been recently cuts to the proposed budget for next year in the district. It's over $6 million cut, federal funding cut for these resources. What impact does that have when you're really looking at people and not just numbers? And
that's that's the most important question, right? What are we doing to help support survivors and be able to leave safely with their kids? It's really frightening and also very saddening to see that there's this slash in this funding when we know the problem is getting worse.
Right.
And also you see it from the leadership in this country as well, where these issues are not important, gender-based violence. But in that sense too, I think it's really important to help survivors understand that there is support. Right? There are shelters, there are hotlines, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Becky's Fund created an NDOV, which is a phone app that allows people to be able to search for resources. But I think a biggest part is even mainstream-wise. How are we responding? How are we talking about this issue? And I always say to people, the most important thing is to educate yourself about this, right? Understanding that if someone comes to you and say, I'm going through this, first, be able to say, like, first, thank you so much for trusting me to come to me. I believe you. What can I do to support you? And then also second, respect and empower their decision. Survivors know best when they are able to leave. And it's our job as friends, as advocates, to be able to say, when you're ready, whatever you need, I'm here to support you. But also the second part is know what resources are available, right? And so there are resources in the city, also nationally, through hotlines, through shelters, and as well as obviously support through people understanding, like, I know what to do if this person comes to me.
Right.
And the last part also really important is about self-care, right, and follow-up, because this is not an easy topic.
Yeah.
When the numbers are that high, we know that all of us either know somebody that has been through it or maybe grew up in it, and recognizing what it means to be able to have an open conversation about this topic without blaming.
Yeah. Becky Lee, founder of Becky's Fund, thank you so much. An important conversation that I hope we can continue having.
Oh, thank you for having me.